Good morning, my name is Kirsty Dignam and I'm here to look at the weekly energy with today's Monday's Musings on the 28th of April 2025. I feel, although I've planned to do this reading, although it's something that I do regularly, although it's nothing out of the ordinary, as though I've been chucked in at the deep end this week, and that's where I really feel my throat almost closing over, or rather it may feel as if our ability to communicate is being shut down, but what's actually happening is a greater expansion and unraveling of what needs to be heard. It doesn't matter if it's something we've always known. It doesn't matter if it's something we've always done. There are still so many ways to communicate what is going on. There are still so many versions of ourselves to be heard and to be seen, which is a beautiful thing. However, it could very well be that this week that can bring forward an energy of not feeling ready, an energy of, despite everything falling into place, despite everything showing us how well we are walking the path, there may be a temptation to believe that we're not quite there, because there's a attachment to where there is. Now, this isn't about making it solely about presence. This isn't going to be a lecture about being in the body and being in the very moment, but recognizing that we can do both, that being in the present moment and having a vision for our future simultaneously is to be present as well. Presence doesn't mean that we restrict the potential. It doesn't mean that it's everything either. There's a fine line and balance this week between what we want, what we're doing to achieve that in every single moment. Only when we can see the steps that we have taken can we really truly appreciate the journey and who we are as a result. An example, either side of me, you can either focus on the suitcase that is packed, actually packed with Christmas decorations, but packed nevertheless, or the box in the background over here that is half packed with stuff from my room, because this is where I am, in the void of not knowing. However, I'm packed. I'm ready as I can be for whatever is coming, as are we all. And that feels really important to acknowledge this week. So that we, actually I was going to say so that we don't continue to repeat things that need completing, but that in itself is a repetition this week, so that we can not feed into the energies that have taken perhaps more of our attention than was needed, and recognize what's underneath it, what the reason that we do these things, the reason that we seek what we seek, the reason that we manifest or create or set intentions. Allowing that to guide us this week step by step is really, really important. Is there anything else? It feels like I can get really caught up in the new moon that we've just had for Taurus, which I've written a blog on, or last week's video, and there is that temptation there to keep going back to things, to almost convince ourselves again that we're ready, or convince ourselves that we've done the quote unquote work. However, it all comes down to how we feel in the moment. It all comes down to how ready we feel. And if we're having to regurgitate stories, energies, without absorbing the medicine, we're just going to keep repeating that. Less is definitely more this week. Feeling into the guidance that is there, that has always been there, that we may have perhaps restricted by trying to control things. Thank you. So an example, I've looked at many houses this weekend and they've all had their pros and cons, but out of the blue, fingers crossed, was a complete and utter wild card, complete and utter wild card that took not only myself acting on my intuition, but my husband the real estate agent who arranged a viewing on a Sunday, no less, the tenant that agreed to show us around the home, all of these things. And then today, feeling the change in the energy rather than try and push or force it, doing what I can do and stepping away. Recognizing that what we are creating is going to take some real instinctual behaviors that may not make sense. This particular home doesn't make sense on paper. However, it is more aligned with the greater vision that I have for myself and where I want to go with what I do. There have been other opportunities, an example, a home right on the beach, exactly what I would have wanted, but it isn't 100% what I would want because it belongs to someone else. It's a 6-month rental. There's old energy systems there, which feels like key. We cannot make something what we want it to be, and it can have similarities, but it doesn't make it so. If we continue to collectively and individually adapt situations rather than see them for what they are, no matter how painful that can be, no matter how frustrating that can be, nothing shifts and nothing changes. We are more positively aligned to take steps towards what it is we really want than settle this week. It may not feel as if we're settling. What we're being offered may feel as if it's on paper, and that's the key. On paper, it ticks all the boxes. That's why instinct is really, really important this week. Not to get caught up in a logical mind, but to come back into the body and sense into what is occurring. Is it a carrot? Are you being offered a carrot that is distracting your energy? There can often be a mentality of, there's a big difference between efficiency, simplicity, and laziness this week. Just passing on the message. So there's a difference between flow and procrastination. There's a difference between receptivity and entitlement. And this week there's a fine line with that. Why is that important? Well, creation isn't solely about doing, and it isn't solely about receiving. There has to be a dance between us and the universe, us and the energies. It's not about overreaching and over trying, but it is about showing up as well. I find there's two sides to a lot of the manifestation that I see, other than the, being aligned with the mindset and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to get into that, but there's normally two energies that I see. And one is the person that will push and push and push. And the other one is the person that will do very little. Now, whether that's in manifestation or a relationship, creativity is no different. See this week as not a tug of war. Well, it could be a tug of war for some people, more of a dance. There are things that we cannot control, that we have to wait for the answer to come back. We have to wait for that communication. We can control what we are capable of doing. And that is our role in the picture. It is not our place to take on the roles of others. There are many things that are unraveling, many things that are rebuilding. There is a bigger plan here. But if we continue to do things solely on our own, based on how we think things should be, we are limiting the vision that we hold. So for me to pick the house on the beach because it's what I want, I've limited the potential there because I've gone straight for what I believe it needs to be, ignoring all the reasons why it isn't. This week, do not let the dream confuse you. You can see that it can easily happen, right? Do not let the dream confuse where you are, the steps that you need to take. Don't let the dream become everything. It's that old cliche, right? The destination. It's not about that. It's about the journey as well. That being said, it's not just about the journey either. There's a lot of energies out there of this is what I gained, this is the medicine, myself included, the medicine that I gained, this is how it's always been, I am a survivor, I am this, I am that. Having that fine line, recognizing everything that we experience is medicine, but we can still overdose on our own stories. Being mindful of that this week. we can refuse to take our own stories as well. So keeping that balance this week is going to be key as we lead into the equinox. And when we feel into the need for balance, we can feel into the reasons behind it. Where is this all going? We have Beltane coming up, which is the balance of the masculine and the feminine energy. And then we have the solstice, the balance of light and darkness. So we're only going to experience that balance and harmony based on the equilibrium within us. We have time to sort that out before then. And I can't help but smile. Even though things are no more certain than what they were yesterday, I can't help but smile because there is a certainty there. Based on last week's video, there is a certainty of ourselves in uncertainty. Many times when there are dark nights of the soul or difficult moments, we can believe that we are lost. We can believe that we are frustrated. We can believe that we do not know the answers and end up losing ourselves in the process. Now, that's not to say that that's not a normal part of the process. Remembering to regain what we do know, regain who we actually are, to come out the other side. A lot of the times when we have these journeys, these descents to the underworld, if you will, it's about letting go of all the things that we wanted that actually aren't set for us, all the situations that are of no benefit for us anymore, including our own mindset and view of who we are and where we are. So is there anything else? Well, when I tune into it, I can see guitar playing by the beach, which is the other thing I want to share. I have decided with the homes that I've picked, and it's not by accident, I have decided to say no to the one that's by the ocean, where the water is there all the time, high tide all the time, and hopefully receive the one that actually has a tide, that has a coming and going, that has a movement. Okay, so this week deciding that it's not necessarily about being in the spotlight or the creative force or the action or even the procrastination all the time, but there's a time to act and a time to be, and to ensure that we are in balance with that. We are in tune with our own tidal energy. There's also a lot of completions coming that we may not see their vastness, or we may try and find their vastness and seek it outside. So the home that I've actually said yes to is one that I several years ago spent a lot of time by the water, I feel that in my heart, a lot of time sending prayers and healings, which I've only just realized by looking on my own social media and the memory section of my own social media. I know that one of those moments I actually placed a crystal into the ocean, and I can't remember what it was about. And I have spent a lot of time this morning trying to remember what that wish was, to remember what that prayer was, what that ritual was, what the aim was. And I can't. All that I can feel into is that by returning to this space, there's been a completion. This week, we may feel drawn to certain areas and certain situations, and that's where I feel my throat, in order for a communication that started a long time ago to come to some form of closure or completion. We can see it as things continually repeating themselves, or an opportunity to bring forth another level of understanding to our situation. And when I do that, it's not that the excitement goes. Let's face it, we all get addicted at times to our own drama and our own stories. It's not that the excitement goes, and that can often feel like it's, if we let go of who we were, there's a what next, this is what's driven me, this is what's inspired me, a secondary gain to that, something that was being tapped into this morning. But actually, when we see that it's not about letting go of our stories, but bringing them forth onto another level of understanding, only from that space do we really start to see who we are and the growth that has occurred for us. And that's where I really feel the back of my throat opening. And in doing so, there's a deep grounding into our body, into the earth beneath us, friend of mine shared today that they went out into the tide, and I could just imagine, you know, when there's been water there and the sand has got really damp, but it's become very heavy and it almost pulls us down and really roots us into what's beneath us. It has been an incredibly emotional time for a lot of people, and there seems to have been wave after wave of the same emotions, the same psyche, but underneath it all, acknowledging it's an opportunity to really sink our feet into where we are. More importantly, who we are. And it's important that we recognize that difference. Excuse me, presence isn't about accepting the situation and not changing it. Presence is about coming into the body, into our fullest potential and our strength to work with whatever is occurring around us. I said last week there's an invitation for many to really understand what change is, and many will be doing so from a different level. Whereas we were once adapted and evolved by change, many are being encouraged to bring the potential of things that need to change into their now reformed body. There has been, I wrote about it in the blog, there has been and will be great shifts on the human biology. We will see many things rising from the ocean. We will see many things rising from within us also. If we can take time and act only when we feel we need to act, like the tide, but take time to come within and be, you know, really go into our own retrograde at times as needed, we will adapt and integrate these energies far quicker. But that does mean bringing back our energy from places that have taken our own distractions and helped to feed those hidden gains underneath it. Now, hidden gains aren't a negative thing. They're not, secondary gains aren't a negative thing. They're things that would have either kept us safe at one point. You know, I know a lot of people that long to get fit and healthy in their body or lose certain amounts of weight or whatever that may be, but they are unable to shift what they're trying to change because there's a gain there of not being seen, or there's a gain there of having self-care when we feel poorly, or there's a gain there of being more safe if they find themselves less attractive. Really feeling into what is going on. However, that being said, secondary gains can also be the things that inspire us. I've always struggled, I've always experienced X, Y, and Z. It's made me stronger. Recognizing that our stories, positive or negative, depending on how we see them, they are just stories. They have both sides. Even the positive ones and the negatives still have positive sides also. Either way, they are just stories that return us to who we are. They are just an opportunity to help us really look at what's going on and be present with where we are. Is there anything else on that before we look into the energies? There's a heartache this week. There's a yearning. There's an opening almost as vast as the ocean actually this week. And it all depends on how well we can embrace and be with that initial discomfort. It is an initial discomfort for change, for things that we've longed for answers, for clarity. But what I see is almost, and that's such a beautiful, beautiful analogy. You know, when you put your ear to the shell from an ocean, from the sea, you can hear the ocean. What I see is placing metaphorically our own ear to our own heart and listening to the ancient wisdom that is in there. So often our desires and our wants and our dreams are very restricted. You know, we can think we want this job or we want this home or we want this relationship. What we're actually wanting is that part of us that feels it needs that externally. So feeling into what that is, really listening to that wisdom, really listening to that communication within the heart. I never thought I'd be attracted to the ocean. I'm a fire sign. But the more and more I'm near the ocean, there's a remembrance within me of this vastness that is there, this potential expansive peace that is there, and the chaos of the waves also. But there's so much more to us to discover. And this week, if we can sit with the frustrations of the limitations we have placed on ourselves, the inner tension there, and allow that to shift and move, we may, by the end of the week, see just where a lot of this was headed. Okay, so not getting caught up in the individual steps, but not ignoring the individual steps, keeping everything in harmony and in balance. I don't know what the full moon is and when it is, but it feels quite relevant. It feels as if we're leading up to so many things. You know, the 1st of May, the solstice, the full moon. I feel like get comfortable. I feel like I'm about to tell a story. Get comfortable. Okay, energies this week and how to best navigate them. And it's really interesting because I can feel almost the more I try and lean into what it's all about, the more it almost moves away. Don't chase the answers. Be with the uncertainty, knowing that by being with the uncertainty, you're actually asking the question. Okay, energies this week and how to best navigate them. So I've had an ache all down the left side of my back ever since I've started this video. It feels like I want to turn around and almost stretch my back out there. And right at the bottom of the pack we have the Tower. These are necessary changes that are occurring. Okay, this is something that needs to shift now, that helps us to stop looking behind us, that helps us to really face what is going on in front of us. So how do we best navigate that this week? There are going to be changes with the body, necessary changes with the body that for a lot of people are already occurring, and it is about alignment. It is about the position we have been taking on many levels. Oh, and the rigidity with that, there's a lot of stiffness. This is who I am, this is what I believe, this is how it's going to be, our dreams included, and there's a lot of stiffness with that. There's a lot of movement that is needed this week, a limbering up almost. One of the things I've been seeing a lot of lately is about the marathon, you know, recognizing that it is a marathon, that life is a marathon. It's not a sprint that we get over and done with. It's not something to rush through, but to really train ourselves. You know, things have shifted, have changed, have we? What have we been putting off in regards to that? How in alignment are we with what it is we're trying to bring forward here? The King of Wands. Not surprised to see this energy at the bottom. Are our actions actually true to our core potential? Are they limited to our stories? Are they restricted by our dreams? Or do they go beyond all of that? Because it's that that's going to be needed here, our animal instinct. You know, the line in the background, our Salka. I felt the other day that the Leo season was really starting to come into play, and I know it's not obviously until the end of July, middle of July, sorry, but I can feel the promise of that. And I'm a Leo, so what am I sensing into? I can feel the promise of an open-hearted expansion. I can feel the promise of more loyalty, more sovereignty, more light after quite a dark period of time for many people. However, promises are promises, right? It all depends on how willing we are to see things from a different perspective, ourselves included. So energies this week and how to best navigate them, because that kind of, I'd be very aware of lip service this week, filling in the gaps, very aware of saying the same thing and nothing actually changing. So let's really, there's a need to get real this week. There's a need to be more vulnerable with ourselves, to want more from our connection, to feel into the potential anxiety that may bring as we shift, as our vibration shifts. Energies this week, how to best navigate them. Yeah, okay. Ace of Swords here. There is a calling here from us and from our collective, from our universe and from our guides and from whatever energy you want to deem that, from our jobs, from our relationships, to go that step further, to open up and see just what is unraveling here, to really let go of our rigid mindsets and how things were, the words that we use, the way that we would communicate. It's okay to not do things how they've always been done. It's okay to change your mind about who you are or what it is you offer. It's okay to evolve. Now, I'm not saying you have to, but it is okay to do so. I wrote a newsletter last week about authenticity and my own misunderstanding about authenticity, or not a misunderstanding, a complacency with it in order to fit in and belong, believing that it meant I would be the same the whole way through. Of course not. Things change. Everything changes. It's okay to be this person at one point and decide that you've grown and that you want to move on from that. Doesn't mean that you're being disrespectful or disloyal to your stories or the people around you or what has got you where you are. You can still take those things with you in your energy. It doesn't mean you have to regurgitate the wounds in order to give them some kind of recognition or to be of service to your journey beforehand. You are living proof of what you've been through. It really is as simple as that. And it's okay to move forward from, I feel like I'm almost giving permission. It's okay to move forward from everything that has helped you remember who you are. Take the version of yourself you've remembered forward. It's okay to do that. It's not being disloyal. It's not throwing away things that have meant a lot to you. It's helping you fine tune and hone who you really are. Okay, I'm not going to shuffle the deck again because that feels quite important. I'm going to push the camera back, get some space from what is being seen and shown. That feels important as well, to step back and really observe what is going on. But I'm not going to keep shuffling the deck. I'm not going to keep repeating the same message. What we're going to do is look into the energies and how to best navigate them. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Overall does feel a bit samey if we let it be. And that's the key. If we let it be. You can eat the same pudding over and over and over and get bored with it, or you can really be present in your body and taste it and appreciate it for what it is. So if something this week is frustrating, or it feels a bit boring, or you feel apathetic to it, whether that's relationships or jobs, make the choice. Do you want to be there? And if you do, work at it. We seem to be, as a nation, quite, or as a species even, quite resistant to having to work at things, whether that is our relationships or, I'm all for ease and grace, but ease and grace also takes a showing up. It doesn't mean forcing things, but it does mean taking, showing up to things, putting in the effort. If you want deeper connections, how well are you connected? If you want, a greater connection to source or spirit, how dedicated are you to that? If you want a more fulfilling relationship, how willing are you to be the version of yourself, vulnerable, flawed, open, whatever, in order to receive that yourself? How willing are you to do the work for what it is you want this week? And what does that actually look like? So going back to the example of the house on the beach, I could quite easily have said yes to that one. I said, jobs are good and I've got what I wanted, I've manifested. But in my core of core, it wasn't what I wanted. It was a veneer of what I wanted on the outside. Inside, internally, there were so many things not right with that. So yes, I'm having to pick the one that isn't quite the outward expression of what I would like. But on a core level, it feels as though it has more potential because there's room there to grow and to gain insight and wisdom from that. There's a big fear around growth. There's a big, and it's not a fear around growth. It's a fear about the work we believe we need to do in order to grow. Growth isn't about changing who we are. It's about being more in that and really learning from our own wisdom and expanding the view we have of ourselves and our relationships and what we're trying to achieve or not, as the case may be. So understanding what the resistance really is. I know by distracting myself trying to find the right home, there are so many things that I've put on the back burner. My own health, and my body's telling me that. My own health, my own routine, all of these things have been so reliant on the right home. And what that's actually done is give me the secondary gain of not being able to work as much as I would like, give me the secondary gain of having to take care of myself. Why would that be a secondary gain? Because it feels the same narrative that until my home is safe, I never will be. At one point, that was my truth. So really looking this week, what is navigating your creative flow? Does it work for you? If it works for you, hey, great. But you'll be able to tell if you're being 100% honest with yourself whether or not you still need to do things the way that you do. It's not about changing them, expanding them, giving that part of you a different view, a different role. Overall, we have the Knight of Swords, and there is that energy from last week still hanging around. And I will say still hanging around. And there comes a choice where a time where we have to say whether or not we're willing to carry things forward or do things in the same way. This week, whether we get the home that we've applied for or not, my husband and I have decided to draw a line in the sand. There is no more searching and using our energy to find the next space. We will pack things up, put it in storage, and go with whatever, whether that's sofa surfing or living in a friend's caravan, and go with whatever comes up for us, because there comes a point where you acknowledge you have done all you can in that moment and you draw the line. And you wait for the universe, the person, the job, the situation, whatever that may be, to catch up. We often, one, don't give creations time to manifest, or if they don't quite manifest in the way we believe they should, in the time span we believe they should, we push and rush and we don't allow that space. Co-creation is just that. We have to give time for that answer to come back. Rather than, if it isn't the answer we like, shifting it, changing it, ignoring it, moving on to something else. If it isn't the answer that we like, so feel into that. Allow ourselves to feel that frustration and ultimately re-inspire us. Too often we react rather than respond. On the Monday, we have the Page of Pentacles. We have this new opportunity that is based in our hands. So it's not the Ace of Pentacles, hasn't been given to us. We've worked for this opportunity. We've had to really figure out what it is we want based on where we are. And there's grounding with that, but it's new. Okay, so it could, and that's where I really feel the pain in my back, it could potentially be wobbled. So sensing into that, allowing space to nurture and to really stand in what we've gained, to really be present with our body and the potential that we hold for ourselves. This is what we've been given. Does this work for me? Find solid footing with that first and foremost. On the Tuesday, we have the Two of Swords. And in this card in particular, there's a lot of mental energy coming in that is blinding the situation. However, the character isn't fighting that either. So having that balance of sometimes distractions can be beneficial because they help us go within. A lot of noise outside, a lot of stress outside, again, it's that secondary gain, can help us go within and receive the answers that we seek. In order to make a secondary gain a gain, an actual gain, it's not about getting rid of it. It's about looking at where it comes from and working with it. When I experience this, this is what I do. So why do I do what I do? Well, when I go within, I get the answers. Well, can we not get the answers without experiencing the stress first? Is that imbalance on the Tuesday? On the Wednesday, we have our first major arcana, and it's Judgment. I was in a very interesting position. That felt very, it's the Judgment card. Okay, so really looking at what we are releasing when we let go of our secondary gains. What we believe we may be releasing when we let go of our secondary gains. What loyalty there is there. Judgment comes often from inherited beliefs, and that's where my ear hurts and my jaw hurts. And it's like, there's so much tension here, so much stubborn rigidity about how things were, about this is how I work, this is how I do things. It's not my role to tell anybody to do things differently. It really, really isn't. At the end of the day, it comes down to informed, conscious choice, and that is what we're all facing this week. However, what I would say is if it hurts you, if you feel solid in your energy, if you feel as if you're going over the same things and nothing is shifting, if you feel as if it no longer works for you, it doesn't take a genius to realize it no longer works for you. The invitation here is to look at any judgments we may have about letting things that are no good for us go. Where that may come from, what part of us believes these things still need to be this way. What have we blinded ourselves to? How present are we in the process that we have and the choices that we have, the power that we have, all of us in our own hands to create what it is we now need? How much do we believe in that? On the Thursday, we have the Two of Wands. We have this character that is waiting, doesn't seem bored in the waiting, but waiting nevertheless. You can see that the dreams of travel are dreams. It can feel that way on the Thursday, that they may be a pipeline, that they may be out of our reach, that no matter what has been done, you know, this could be vision boards, this could be ceremonies, this could be, whatever it is we have done to put these things into place can feel as if they are a million miles away or literally round the corner. And the difference here is our ability to stand in that transitional energy, in that patience, in that point just before the fall jumps off the cliff, in that point just before the wheel of fortune can go up or down. Throughout all of the archetypes, there's this flow, there's this tide, there's this give and take. How patient can we be in those moments? This morning I was terrible. Absolutely terrible. I was the Knight of Swords this morning because there were so many things out of my control. It was, we've been given this home. Yes, we'll say yes to it. Wonderful. Okay, let's get things moving after such a long period of time. And then I couldn't get hold of my husband and I couldn't get hold of the estate agents. And this potential started to get quite resistant because I was interfering, right? So I phoned the estate agent and said, here is X, Y, and Z. This is all I can do. I have other things to get on with now. Recognizing this week when we start to feel frustrated or apathetic or as if nothing is changing or shifting, where have we come out of our energy? Where have we put ourselves into the vibration of others? What is it we don't trust? What is it we're trying to control? On the Friday, we have the Six of Pentacles, and this feels on a universal level. Many, myself included, have asked for things to happen and it's taken a long time, or it may not feel as if it's happening in the way that we had hoped or planned. And there can be a real wound there regarding what we give, what we receive. There can be a real wound there, almost as if it feels as if there's a hierarchy. You know, certain people can get things and we can't, or whatever. Looking beyond that this week to the underlying current of our own deep worth. How do we feel when it comes to that? Do we feel worthy of the things that we are asking for? If so, why would we question how they come through? On the Saturday, we have the inner child energy here in the Six of Cups. So remember that six is harmony. It may feel harsh. It may feel as if things are out of balance. It may feel the other way. But remember that six is actually harmony. It's all linked to Tippereth under the ribs with the solar plexus type energy. So it's on a soul level, provided we recognize that our higher self, the vision itself of who we are, is guiding this, and trust that. We will find that balance and that harmony. A great exercise to do in times of uncertainty is to place what's called on the Sea of Tranquility, just below the sternum, just below where the ribs meet, just to place two fingers there and breathe in and just breathe out and take that moment to keep restoring the balance and the harmony throughout this week, because there's a lot shifting here with the inner child as well. This weekend, I don't know about anybody else, but a lot of light came in about heart expansion and how we see the world. And I could really feel my own less wounded inner child coming through to the surface. And it was a beautiful thing to witness. However, with that has come vulnerability. And of course, that part of me longs to hide again. So allowing the light to come up, to be expressed, and then taking time to really care and nurture for that part of yourself, because it's still vulnerable. We live in a world where authenticity is amazing, right? Yeah, we're gonna spill our guts out everywhere and tell everybody everything. However, especially for the oversharers in the world like myself, be mindful that that leaves you vulnerable. And it's not about protecting that vulnerability, but feeling into that vulnerability, holding space for that vulnerability, that tenderness as well, being accountable for what you need in those moments of being open this weekend. Because on the Sunday, we have the Lovers card. Yes, we can say this is all about choice, and that's why I feel the pain in my back. Yeah, there's a real rigid belief that it's about choice and it's about this and it's about that and what I want and what they want. However, underneath it all this week, there is a wonderful opportunity for some real heartfelt, deep connections to each other, to the earth, to our vision, and to ourselves. Excuse me. Remembering with the analogy of the sea, yes, we have the tides that come in and come out. That's life, right? But the sands of time that we embed our feet into, that we find ourselves grounded in, our body, our presence, that stays. That stays no matter what is occurring throughout life. Our connection to ourself is always there. If we can't feel it, if we feel confused or we feel frustrated this week or undecided about what we need to do, or where are we blinded to our own potential? What are we looking at to reflect that? What part of our narrative does that actually feed? Is it our gain, our primary gain, or our secondary gain here? It's not to say that one is better than the other, but the outcome and the journey itself may vary depending on that. I feel an ache in the middle of my spine from the left side going through to my heart, and there does feel almost an element of betrayal here, or loss here, or a almost like a stabbing in the back, actually, that type of energy. Not being aware of the energies that are behind us, that are, again, still, I hear the word self-fulfilling prophecy. Looking at where we may be completing a narrative, because what would we do without it? So I'm fully aware that as a quote unquote healer, and yes, I will still say quote unquote because I'm struggling with that part of me that accepts it fully. But as a healer, I'm fully aware that the more I help people get better, I'm eradicating my role. So there's going to be secondary gains there for myself. There's more for me to learn. There's more for me to experience. There's more for me to fix, because without it, what does that make me then? Without these stories, who am I then? We're never going to know unless we investigate that with some curiosity. It's not about letting go of the essence of who you are. It really isn't. But every one of our stories is a branch of the same tree. It's about coming back into the base and the roots and allowing our stories to blossom beautifully for what they actually are. It's not about focusing on one branch. Okay, so overall, we're 42 minutes. Let's get down to business. It's that song in my head. We have two major arcanas, and that's where I feel anxiety in my chest, actually. Let's get down to business. Yeah, some things are unavoidable this week. We've done the work, and there's going to be opportunities that help us to see that. That help us to apply what we have discovered about ourselves into real life, to integrate these things. We have two major arcanas here, the Judgment card and the Lovers, and this is where I'm almost drawing a blank, so feeling into that. It's not going to be the obvious judgments that we have. It's going to take some deep connection to ourselves this week to understand the intimacy that's required. If we were in a relationship with somebody and they constantly pointed out our flaws, well, they constantly said, you need to fix this, you need to heal this, you need to shift this, you need to be better at X, Y, and Z. After a while, unless that's your thing, or, you're unable to get out of that situation, after a while, you wouldn't stay with that person. This week, if we are to release any judgments we have, not only externally, but internally. It's going to take a deeper intimacy into who we are. It's going to take a deeper love and compassion and connection. It's going to take more of the medicine that we need before we start pulling things open. Our body, our soul needs to know that we are able to hold space for ourselves this week. In doing so, ironically, it's that our yearning for that is going to start the judgment process. Our body not trusting ourselves and demanding that we become more open is what's actually going to call us forward to rise above our stories. Okay, so we then have 1, 2, 1, 2. Bit of a mind blank this week when we're trying to figure out whether it's our mindset or our ambition or our emotions. All the time we're trying to separate them. All the time we separate ourselves from our vision, ourselves from the communication with our universe, ourselves from each other. Yes, that can give us solid footing and presence into who we are, but all the time we're separating ourselves from it, we're going to question what's going on. That's okay, but if it leads to questioning ourselves, where's the balance there? We have the 2 physical cards of the Page of Pentacles and the 6 of Pentacles. We can say it's about what I get, what I receive. You know, we can say it's about how aligned I am or whatever, but what are we doing? What are we doing with our own creative potential? What are we creating? What stories are we creating? What energies are we creating? Are we doing so from an authentic, aligned place? An example, I've always had this belief that I struggle to make money because it feeds this belief that my needs are not met, because then that feeds the wounded part of me that says only I can do this, and that feeds the hyper independence in me. Now, there have been times when my needs aren't met. There have been times when there hasn't been times when I can't make the money that I need. It's just been in different ways. There has been times where I love my independence and I don't want to lose that. So this week, really feeling into what is being fed here. Are you regurgitating the same stories when they may not be as necessary? And even that, I'm overcomplicating things now because that's one of my stories. So what attitudes are regurgitating stories that make you feel comfortable this week? And is that serving your highest potential? We then have 2 sword cards, so beautifully balanced with the pentacles here. All the time we're blinded to who we are, we can't move forward, right? Mentally. Now that can be frustrating. That frustration can be enough to cause the friction that's needed in our own mindset. However, if that makes us then charge forward when we don't feel ready, we're not going to trust our process. If that makes us stand back when we are ready and do nothing about it, we're not going to trust our creative process. This week is an opportunity to feel into the tides of your own timing, to really acknowledge when you're ready. It's been really difficult facing homelessness and turning down homes that will make do, and trusting that process. It's been very difficult not to panic when everyone else panics. It's been not just with the home, for many out there, I know that, to keep the calm in times when there's chaos. It's been very difficult to almost go against the external grain, the external flow for a lot of people. But the opportunity since COVID has been about finding our own timing here. This week it's all great when, we get used to that. This week we're going to see just how well we can apply that to other areas of our life, ourselves included. Is it time to move on from how we've seen ourselves and the mental connection that we have to the narratives that have got us this far? And how do we feel about that? We then have 1 wand card and 1 cup card. So the new beginnings come with our ambition and our emotions, but the cup card here is the inner child card. It's also nostalgia. When we're nostalgic, we look back at times that were good. We look back at times when we felt ourselves, or when we felt aligned, happy, strong. You know, sometimes I look back at all the times I've struggled and think, well, you've got through that. And that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. This week in particular, however, there's a fine line between helping ourselves in times of transition with these memories, or whether or not they're keeping us in that transitionary space. Okay, so I'm going to pull one more card. It does feel quite intense. It feels quite confusing this week. Oh yeah, the global scale feels quite the global scale feels quite pessimistic, distractive. Nature is really going to be the key this week. I think we have a heat wave coming actually. It's, yeah, marvelous how that will entice so many of us to get outside. One card this week. Okay, I've never done that before, but for what it's all about. One card for what it's all about. I've never done that before, and that can be really, really pivotal. What have we never done before? Trying something different, trying to see ourselves in a different way, or what we do in a different way. So often we believe something hasn't quite happened how we want, so we pivot and we change who we are, or we pivot and we change what we do. This week, and that's where I kind of get that feeling of having to turn all the time. You know, this week, doing something different from who we've always been, placing ourselves in the spotlight. What if I didn't act that way? What if I didn't fix this and I sat with it? What if I didn't jump ahead and panic? What if I didn't do X, Y, and Z? We have the Six of Wands and the Sun card here, and we're back to the Two of Swords underneath. So there's a real blinding here of our own potential, of our own grace. I can hear that Stormzy song, of our own grace. A lot of people have tied that up with money or jobs or relationships or their struggles or their achievements. These are all beautiful things, but they're not who you are. They're life. You're the tide underneath it all. You're not the waves. Well, you're the waves as well, but you know, really seeing your own grit and your own beauty this week. We have the Six of Wands and the Sun card. Putting ourselves at center stage, but there is a difference between external light and internal light. This week, what is it that's going to be your driving force? Ultimately, they'll get us where we need to be. So, how can we do something different? Well, we have the Fool, we have the Page of Pentacles again, and the Six of Cups. So the only card different here is the Fool. Yes, we're always going to have the impact of nostalgia and the need for balance and harmony and the inner child or the inner wild that will say, well, hang on a minute, I need to experience fun, or I feel wounded here, or I feel vulnerable here. We're always going to have these experiences of life, but what's actually different? The Fool, how we choose to see them, how we choose to create with them. Twist it up, mix it up. Do something different. Have some fun with it. Expand yourself. Stretch yourself. See your fullest potential this week from a brand new perspective. And watch how quickly things unfold. Things have shifted. Things have changed. Have we seen the difference? I'm not 100% sure. See you next week. Take care.